it starts warning me if I don't go live within 10 minutes of when I scheduled the broadcast that Facebook will explode or something will happen. So the warning started to trigger at 11:03. And so now we're live. I'm live here with Brian MacKenzie. Welcome, Brian.
Andy Petranek, you're one of my favorite people in the world. I'm happy to be here.
Same goes. I was just telling Brian, and then I thought we better go live because Facebook will explode. That I was leading my 8:30 meditation this morning, and my son, who's in obviously distance learning, and they're trying to figure things out with school. Actually, he's doing great with school, but suddenly, for no apparent reason, the printer stopped working, and he had a math quiz, and he had all these things. So I'm literally, the meditation has started, and I'm sitting leading the meditation. The printer's in my office. And when the printer prints, it's okay. It makes a little bit of noise. Yeah. But I'm not used to him, doing a 13-year-old's version of cursing, which is, printer's not working. And I'm like, Dad, shh. And so he's whispering, like, the printer's not working. And then up and down the stairs, like all these sounds. And so I just leaned into, the opportunity to use sounds to bring you into the present moment, detaching from what the sounds mean, it was pretty fun.
It's interesting because I talk about meditation a lot in that, it's such a great tool, but when to get really good at it, it means like what happens when you're on fire.
Right.
And I mean, that Thich Nhat, or I forget his whole name, but the Vietnamese guy who lit himself on fire back in the 60s.
Yeah, I don't know his
name. It's Thich Nhat something. But he did it.
Thich Nhat Hanh? Was that? And that's the only.
It's similar to the other Thich Nhat. Don't quote. It does start with Thich because he is Vietnamese.
Yeah.
And he lit himself on fire in protest and meditated his way, and basically just sat there as he was on fire and completely was out of himself. You know what I mean? That's what I think of when I think of tools and what we're doing and trying to do, and that's why I really think that breathing is at the foundation of all this stuff, because it's such a regulator of what's going on from a chemistry standpoint, man.
Well, it's funny, in a way, coronavirus has lit us all on fire, in a new, completely new way, which is interestingly exciting.
Oh yeah.
Like so many opportunities right now for growth and for changes that just weren't possible, 2 months ago, that just ways of looking at the world in new ways, of solving new problems, of, I don't know that LA traffic will ever go back to being what it used to be. Because I think that there's going to be this new opening for working from home that just didn't exist before. And why would you not work from home? I don't know. That's my hope. I don't want it to go back to the way it was. So let's put it out there.
Anybody who's experienced LA doesn't want it to go back to the way it was.
Yeah. No.
I mean, nobody. I mean, that was essentially one of the reasons why I left Southern California. It was just, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I'm not going to get angry at the traffic because I'm choosing to be in it.
Right.
It's so interesting. But I started this decoupling effect 4 years ago when we started. Part of the conversation was about like me living in the middle of nowhere at one point, and I lived in the middle of nowhere, and there was nobody, and it was me from home and me from, I was on 7 acres, there was nobody there, and I didn't have friends out there. I mean, I had like 1 or 2, and it was like the wheels started coming off a couple months in, like what's going on, and you're there with yourself, and it's like, you got to learn how to be alone, and this is what we're getting. It's such an opportunity. It's such an opportunity to really understand what we are without all this outward chaos going on, and how we can actually understand our relationship to it. Consumerism, right? Like we got to buy, be in this mode. And it's like, no, not really. You don't
Right.
really need to do that, but
Right.
that is what we all have, and I'm complicit in this.
Yeah.
You know, I get in this buy mode like Amazon. I can get it now. I can get it, you know, and it's like there's a delay, and it's like, what are you talking about, a delay? I'm used to like 2 days, and I've got this thing in my, you know, my house. Anyway, it's just so interesting, and you know, I really have learned to, as difficult as it gets sometimes, and it's not that it's been easy, but I've recognized that pain is the opportunity.
Right.
That is this place.
Right.
I need to go there. I cannot go around this. If I go around this, I will suffer, and that is my choice.
Well, I just knowing how both of us are pretty good at going down wormholes and not necessarily getting to what our purpose of being here, and how this conversation could go 3.5 hours if I let it, and I made a commitment to not do that. Let's get to the point. So yes, I wanted to have you on because of your expertise and you've already alluded to it, breathing and breath, and the work you've done, whether it's been through cold exposure and breathing, or heat exposure and breathing, or performance and breathing, or endurance and breathing, or, you know, just living and breathing. Yeah. You know, it's very, very applicable to right now, especially, you know, it's interesting that the COVID attacks through the lungs, and, you know, here we go to the breath again. I mean, part of COVID, that's part of the, you know, thing. So, so I wanted to talk to you about, like, what, you know, there's some things that I've been doing through your nudging of various people, meeting people and talking to people, and, you know, taping my mouth shut at night. Patrick McEwen's been on my podcast, you know, so, but I wanted to just chat with you about what you see as the opportunity for just kind of normal folks around breath and breathing, and why that's so important. You know, I'm gonna stop talking and let you talk.
Certainly. Man, I'm really grateful for the work Patrick's done. You know, he really, I mean, if you really look at this, he was doing this before Wim Hof even came anywhere close, you know, and he was on to something. And it's not like, look, Wim Hof is very important. He's probably the most important person in breath, only in the fact that he's gotten so many people to look at breathing, regardless of the fact that it's a methodology or what he's doing. It's looking at breathing. Patrick kind of tink, tink, tink said, hey, here's what's going on. Like, here are the problems, you know, and he got that from Buteyko.
Right.
And Buteyko was screaming this inside of medicine years. In the
50s, 40s, 30s.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, this was the front line of defense for asthma in the Russian medical system. People don't care about history enough.
Right.
You know? They just don't. And I have learned to really care about history, in that I will literally put myself, I'll just take a book on history in some odd manner, and I'll wrap this into what you just asked about. But I got a book for my brother that's called Empire of the Summer Moon. And it's about the Comanche Nation, and about a guy by the name of a Native American by the name of Quanah Parker, who was the son of Cynthia Ann Parker, who was a woman who was, as a child, stolen by the Comanche Indian in a raid, and raised as Comanche, and ended up marrying a war chief and having his child, of which that child was one Quanah Parker, who became one of the greatest Comanche war chiefs that ever. He was the last great war chief. And the Comanche were important because had the revolver not been created, we would be in very different times. I'm not suggestive of that genocide would not have happened to the Native American culture as it did, and is factual. I can't take that back. It just is what it is. But, you know, there'd have been different outcomes, because the Comanche were so versatile and such they were at a human being level that very few have gotten to. We're talking like, you know, we Genghis Khan, like, you know, takeover type things. They were very good at maneuvering. They could outride any other nation, any other tribe by like 3x. They could fight better than anybody because they learned how to fight off of horseback before anybody else did. All of these accolades happened. It just so happened in this book, there's a guy who was actually quoted throughout the book as a historian. His name's George Catlin. George wrote a book called Shut Your Mouth and Save Your Life in 1867. He was not quoted in this book once about shutting your mouth. He was quoted about his historical analysis of the Comanche and other tribes and indigenous cultures and how prolific they were. But the one commonality that he found that he wasn't quoted in the book, he wrote a book on. That book was about how these people functioned aerobically.
Wow.
They functioned so highly, they shut their mouths and they paid attention to civilized culture so much that they refused to open their mouths, even with their children who would come off of a breast, and they'd shut their mouths with their fingers instantly because they were in fear of what happened to civilized man, of which they called the black mouth.
Wow.
Yeah,
now wait, did you know this when you bought the book? Like how did you
well,
stumble?
I had already read Shut Your Mouth and Save Your Life, but I did not know about, so I just started reading this book on the history of the Comanche and Quanah Parker.
Wow.
And it's unbelievable to me. Like, I just love Native American history portrayed in factual information, right?
Well, let's go back to why shutting your mouth is so important. Like what?
Yeah, and this is the foundation, and this is answering, this circles back to what you asked, right?
Yeah, right.
And
I'm just
I've really learned, totally.
Sure we don't keep circling.
Yeah. So here we are with shutting our mouth. Why would we shut our mouth? Well, it just turns out, just so happens that even this crooked nose that I've got from being punched, and mutilated as a child, as a kid who was very aggressive and played water polo and was involved in a lot of things that he learned lessons on the hard way, can operate at 90% of maximum heart rate after a couple years of development of learning how to use my nose again. Our nose was designed with the respiratory system in mind. Our mouth was designed with the communication, as we're doing now, and digestive system in mind. And although there's some exons and things that work with inside the mouth structure that help with the immune system when we breathe, they aren't that great. It's like a low-level security system, right? Before, 9/11 going through, the airport. Now, if we were to breathe through the nose, we've got hair. That hair is covered in mucus. That mucus is generated through mucosal circuits system, which is part of your first line of defense for T cells, both T cells, helper 1, and MT2, which are basically your frontline defense for things. You've also got memory B cells that are created, that are formulated. Memory B cells are the ones that are responsible for a decade or two later when a virus pops in, they go, yeah, we remember that one. Boom, done. It's over. Right? Your mouth doesn't have these types of systems in them, right? And so then you have sinuses, which humidify, circulate the air, and the cilia, which are microscopic, tiny, tiny hairs, move the mucus and particles that get trapped that may go into the sinuses out of the sinuses, whether they go back or whether they come out forward. Okay, so whether boogers, blowing your nose, or you swallow, you'd be very surprised and grossed out to understand how much mucus you actually swallow. And it's important that you actually do swallow it so that it actually goes into your stomach, because your stomach acid kills those things that have now passed through. The mouth doesn't have this.
So picking your nose and eating it is actually not such a bad thing.
It's not such a bad thing, other than the fact that your mouth could pick up that thing, right? And it may not have the host defense system, right? So that is where that problem.
Better to go through the back door than the front door.
Certainly,
we don't have to talk about
other. Yes, totally. But look,
that can go a lot of wrong directions.
Yeah, we're banking. The fact is, I'm really banking on something that I've really that a good friend of mine who actually lives with me. His name's Dr. Fergus Connolly. We'd had many discussions, and he's like, "Look, is psychology really just misunderstood physiology?" And this is where this circles into breathing, because our physiology, we're designed to handle stress at a very high output, real high output, and that's why I kind of started the story with the Quanah Parker thing. Is what these people were capable of doing, even civilized man, what he was capable of doing, and he and she is what I mean, in the 1800s, 1860s, we are nowhere near handling in terms of stress, right? So maybe it's not that we have a disorder right now. Maybe it's not that it's anxiety and depression. You know, maybe this is just a natural reaction to the stimulus we're taking in from the outside and not really paying attention to things from the inside. And to understand how you feel, you have to actually go inside and understand that and take and understand, like, what are the base layers of that? What is it that's going on? And it just so happens that our breath is connected to the very thing that's going on when all of that's transparent, that all of this stuff is going on in my head. And why is that happening? Because here's how neurobiology works. We have 5 senses, and those 5 senses have input circuits that actually go into the cortex of the brain. There are large dedicated spaces in the brain, in the cortex, for this. That then responds to an emotional system that is evolutionary in trait. Our primary emotions are happy, sad, fear, and anger. We say evolutionary because every animal basically experiences these emotions. So they're there for a reason, for the 5 senses to interpret our environment and what goes on. We have this cortex, and namely a prefrontal cortex, that can do a lot of critical thinking. So we do a lot of thinking towards things, and we critically think about things. We also overthink a lot of things, which inevitably can also create emotional responses to things. So how I see my environment is not necessarily how you see your environment, but that doesn't mean I'm right or you're wrong. What it means is that I can start to overthink these things and start to try and predict these things. And when that happens, I can create emotions about them. Well, these emotions then are sent down to my 3rd layer of the brain, because the emotions are part of the limbic system, which is the 2nd oldest part of the brain. Then we've got the oldest part of the brain, which is the brain stem. This is where all of the circuitry is sent out into the spinal cord and the nerves into the system on what to do and how to do it and how the physiology responds. One of the things inside that brainstem that's very important is our respiration centers. Those are tied to carbon dioxide and oxygen and pressure. Mainly when we are conscious, we predict on a predictive system through our arterial system. This is very important. Predict, okay? What's going to happen with CO2 as we've inhaled and as that blood goes out towards the periphery. Since we like to predict a lot of things, this gets tied up in our ventilation system. So by my statement earlier is, maybe it's not that we have a disorder, maybe it's just the amount of stimulus we're taking in and not doing or understanding what's going on with that stimulus. This is where breathing ties in from a psychological and physiological side, to where aerobic function has to happen because of carbon dioxide. We have to have enough carbon dioxide present in the blood in order to make oxygen bioavailable. And by and large, most of us who are stressed out are in an over-breathing or hyperventilation state. We're in a dysfunctional breathing pattern. This is most of us. Even though there's a lot going on about breathing right now, most of us deal with some form of CO2 intolerance.
Meaning carbon dioxide levels are actually too low.
You got it.
What you're saying.
You got it. And so when carbon dioxide levels are low, we actually have our blood is inflated with oxygen. And most people be like, well, isn't that a good thing?
Right.
No, negative. That means the oxygen is not being used as well as it could, which means you're leaning more towards carbohydrate use and more towards anaerobic processes in order to use energy, because you need to use energy in order to stay alive. That, like, everything in this world wants us dead, everything wants everything dead. That's how it works. So we have to produce energy, ATP, in order to stay alive. We got 2 ways of doing that, aerobically and anaerobically, right? And the more efficient way, the deal that was made 2.5 billion years ago or so, was aerobic metabolism, because it's so efficient. We don't know of anything more efficient than aerobic metabolism. And it just so happens that the byproduct of beta oxidation, aerobic metabolism, is carbon dioxide and water. And so that carbon dioxide has to get out of the blood system by getting back into the red blood cell and then being transported through the blood and coming out of the lungs. So this exchange has to happen. And the less optimal we are at this, the more we tend to overbreathe or have dysfunctional breathing patterns, like just sitting here feeling not doing a lot. There's no metabolic demand for me to be mouth breathing right now, but because it feels easy and I'm stressed, I'm suppressing my tolerance to carbon dioxide. And so what becomes more difficult is, but yet we understand, what do we do with somebody when they freak out? Hand them a paper bag. This is one of the old things we used to do. You hand them a paper bag, breathe into the bag.
Yeah.
What are you doing? You're rebreathing CO2. Why are you doing that? Because you're actually you're calming yourself down, because your CO2 is a vasodilator. Oxygen is a vasoconstrictor. So when I get rid of that CO2, there's more oxygen and I constrict the blood vessels, making it actually more difficult. So this is why when you hyperventilate on purpose, you can get high. You're constricting the blood vessels to the brain. That's what getting high is. And so people are doing this almost in a chronic state. And so when we talk about things, we really want to get people to understand, hey, breathe more through your nose. Know the difference between nasal breathing and mouth breathing. And when is it necessary to breathe through our mouth? And take some time to explore this. Maybe spend the next 4 weeks just breathing through your nose, no matter what you do in training.
I started doing that. This is about 9 months ago, I started really using the Peloton that was at my house. I bought it for my wife, and it was sitting. And I was like, I don't know, why not? And I started Pelotoning, and it's become like a thing for me. Like I've done 30 days in a row now. And I mean, I've been doing it a ton. Like I just fell right back into
because you never fall into things, do you?
No, I never fall into things. So, but I started practicing just keeping my mouth shut for all workouts, like with that, whatever level I was going. And it was not always possible. I'd be going to be doing some of these hard workouts and, falling into mouth breathing. But I've gotten to a place now, this is about 9 months later, when unless I'm doing a 20-minute time trial, which they do a FTP test.
Yeah.
And it's probably the hardest I hate the FTP test because it's a 20-minute friend.
I've got one for you. It's got the FTP in it. It's called a 4DP.
I don't know.
Keep going.
But anyway, so it's very rare that I have to breathe through my mouth now. Like I've gotten to a place where, I look at the zones that I train in, like zone 1 through zone 7. If I'm not in zone 6, it's very, some days I have off days and like whatever, I'm going to breathe through my mouth because I'm like breathing through my mouth. Right. But essentially I don't breathe through my mouth anymore. Like it's pretty amazing. And it's pretty amazing. I don't know.
Weird?
And I remember when I started thinking this is not possible. Way. Even in the warm up, like I couldn't I couldn't just breathe through my nose. I'm snotting all over the place and I couldn't, very uncomfortable. And I opened my mouth right away. So, it's been a game changer for me.
Yeah. I mean,
I don't know how I'm better or different because I don't know the difference. I couldn't put another version of me and train mouth breathing next to me. Obviously, that there's limitations.
Well, look, I mean, there's a time and a place to mouth breathe at certain intensities. And let's just go back to what you kind of stated here. What happened? And it's important to understand that if it's zone 6 is when you need to open your mouth on what you're doing, that is a huge difference from, I'm guessing, where you started. I mean, I've taken world champions, some of the best CrossFitters, she's the best CrossFitter so far, and we restructured things with her. But that happened predicated on working with another guy who was a friend of hers, who's a high-level CrossFitter, who, I mean, the changes at the level that they're at, that they saw with just some simple things like this, it's the ego check that in the beginning that it's like, there's no way that we convince ourselves there's no way this is possible, right?
Right.
This is the psychology of things. And psychology is just misunderstood physiology, coming right back to it. Is I don't actually understand the physiology. And there's so many people that are so hamstrung on this. And I was one of them, man. Like, I was one of them. I thought I understood, energy systems and metabolic training real well. And it just so happened that I got kicked in the balls on that. Like, bad. And it was a game changer. And I was like, there is no way this is possible. And this is what we convince ourselves of. And it's like, look, I don't think we totally understand the equation here, because nobody's really challenged it like this. And that's what we've done, is we've challenged it and said, look, give this some time. Now let's play with a gearing system on it, right? Like, let's move up through specific patterns to where we get to mouth breathing at the end, which is like a gear 5, but it's still controlled. And it just so happens that the changes that start to occur are so incredible, it really shouldn't matter what they are, because you actually just feel better in your entire, like, your whole life feels better. Like, I'm calmer, I'm less reactive, I sleep better, those are wins for me. We're so performance or money or driven, right? That we forget that health is our greatest asset. And our health is basically how we feel about ourselves and what's going on. Like, I should feel incredible about what I'm doing right now. And if I don't, there's something wrong. And you said something that was very, very interesting in there, to where it's like, some days I have to mouth breathe. Yep. You know what that is? That means you're probably a little bit more stressed than you were under the impression you were. And so when I can normally breathe through my nose in specific situations when I'm training, and now I can't, or it's much more difficult, we have a very good indicator of something that's off. And this is where that deep foundation layer comes in, of understanding why breath is so important. Because I am very aware of it in my daily life. It's because, like, I'm aware of that, what you're aware of in training. When my breath, like this morning, it was very different from me. I was a little bit more stressed this morning. A lot going on, all this stuff. And my breath changes were happening on some intervals that I typically do that were much harder. And so I was very aware in the very beginning of this, and I was just like, cool, I'll just back off a tad more and just hang in there, because I'm really only doing an endurance piece. I'm really just trying to focus on high level aerobic output. So it's not like I need to do something. But here's the real important part for everybody. When I am reactive to people, or I get a little bit, my primary emotions start to get heightened, I get reactive towards people, or things start to affect me, or I start taking them personally, I know I'm off. And I could just go, oh yeah, that's definitely a little different. Like,
well, does that fall into the prediction mechanism you were talking about before?
Yes.
How does that work? I don't understand. Like, your body
so
has
check this out.
Yeah.
So check this out. We are it's such a great thing, man. We're such a great, look, this is the greatest technological system ever developed, dude. Our biology is the most hardcore thing in the world, but we've ignored it, and we've paid so close attention to this hockey stick of technology and medicine that's just provided this comfort for us to not have to feel anymore. And so here's how CO2 works: is so my carotid artery, not my jugular vein, carotid artery, and my aortic valve of my artery, right? These have sensors in them that go up to my brain stem. So the blood that comes in, so the air that comes into my lungs and then is diffused into my blood, okay? That is predicted by that aortic and carotid towards the brain, towards the periphery, my limbs, what it needs. From a psychological standpoint, how I've made a connection to where I feel panic. So here's what I mean by this. If I said right now, all right, 3, 2, 1, hold your breath, and everybody just held their breath as long as they could, it wouldn't be very good, right? But if we were to take some time and calm down and be like, all right, for the next 2 minutes, we'll just calmly breathe, and then we're going to inhale and hold. We do pretty well, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we've really played this game of calming ourselves down. But if I grabbed everybody by the arm or one by one, and we all went into a pool, and I said, hold your breath, and we went underwater, and I held your arm, what would happen?
Panic.
Bingo, 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 right? And so, and now here's the interesting part that I'm going to parlay here.
And that's psychology. That's not physiology.
That is no.
That's
the
physiology.
Only reason you're going to want to take a breath sooner is because your brain, your prefrontal cortex is going haywire and trying to predict what's going to happen, what you're going to say, and what's going to happen, how it's going to happen. You're going to drown. There might be a shark. There might be this. There might be that. Like,
and this dude is holding me down.
And this dude's holding me down. So here's what happens. I now suppress my ability to tolerate the carbon dioxide in the environment, because it's not that the metabolic demand went up to where I'm creating more CO2, because I haven't.
Right.
Even though there might be a little bit, because I'm going, right? Because brain power and functionality and connections and electricity is going off.
Yeah.
Right? That's not to be denied, but I'm not really creating much more metabolic activity. So the CO2 hasn't gone up, but I've just jammed my ability to handle normal levels of CO2. So what am I doing? I need breath. I need to breathe. Right? So think about your day and when you get stressed out, right? And what happens? We're not thinking about our breathing. So we're just like, oh, you did this, you did that. Oh, you need to do this. I need that. Blah, blah, blah. My kids, the printer's not working. Rah, 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 rah. We're not thinking about this, but what we're doing is we're innately dumping CO2, blunting my tolerance to something that when it actually does arise, the panic switch in the brainstem goes off. And so I've suppressed my ability. You'd be surprised, man, at how low some CO2 tolerances are for people.
Well, we're talking. Do you run the what's the test called that Patrick does, the 20-second breath hold, or not 20
the Bolt score?
The Bolt score. Is that the best way to know where you're at?
I don't feel it is. It's a decent thing. You know, it's a Buteyko thing, and I don't think it was vetted real well. It's really subjective, because
that's the problem I have with it. I don't know when I'm done.
Exactly.
I don't know when I'm done.
Exactly. I know. And this is why it's a problem.
I can force myself to go 40 seconds or 50 seconds.
You got it. Totally. I don't know when that. So the Bolt score for your listeners is simply as you take a few breaths that are just normal, right? Like, then on like the third breath, what you do is when the pause happens in your breath on the exhale, you just hold. When you get the first urge to breathe, that's when the timer stops.
Yeah, that's the problem.
That's your Bolt score.
What the hell's the urge to breathe?
What's that first urge, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So we just ripped off the freediving world is what we did, because the freediving world didn't understand, or didn't really, I've not heard anybody talk about it, is they weren't looking at this as a threefold test. They use a max exhale test. We're calling it a CO2 tolerance test. And we're going to always give them credit, because there's nothing new in this world. And it's a great test because they've been using it forever, and they are really good at developing high levels of CO2 tolerance, right? Like holding your breath for 11 minutes is a phenomenal thing, and they got ways of doing that. So the max exhale test is simply calmly breathing for a minute or two, and then on a full inhale, you time how long you can exhale through your nose as long and as slowly as you possibly can, even though those are the same things that I just said, long and slow. I'm really emphasizing this is not about how fast. This is about how slow you can trickle air out without stopping, swallowing, pausing, anything. And if you run out of air, or if you need to breathe, boom, clock stops.
So you're going beyond the natural emptying of the lungs. You're actually pushing the air out after
all the way down.
And what's
you can get there?
What's a good number? How do you know what good bad is?
Upwards of 45 seconds is good. 60 seconds and above is excellent. And then when you're 80 seconds and above, you are very CO2 tolerant from a static level, meaning there's no stress going on, right?
Right.
We have another way of doing this from more of a metabolic demand standpoint, which this is the big changer for athletes. Is what we found out was that athletes that were really supposedly very aerobically efficient were not so aerobically efficient. They just learned to suffer real well, and they were using carbohydrate real well, versus actually using fat much more efficiently. Beta oxidation, you go back to your FTP test, 20 minutes is right at that place where beta oxidation really kicks in. Slow glycolysis is the thing that's going on for that first 20 minutes predominantly, right? And so you don't even get to that real aerobic state until you've done, this is the importance of a warm-up, or even like a hypoxic type warm-up, is getting a real good pulmonary warm-up and forcing yourself to do some negative breath holds, positive holds, breathing through your nose, doing some intensity while doing it. It's because you'll get that pulmonary system and that system really ready to be in this beta oxidative state much sooner. And so that's really what we're trying to do, is get people functioning in a very high aerobic place, because there's direct relationship with high aerobic output, like being aerobically inclined, and parasympathetic response versus anaerobic and sympathetic. So these are they work together.
What are some of the best ways that either people who are athletic and who are training, or who are not, who are, I mean, not that they're sedentary, but that are not going to go out there and train for a marathon. What are some of the best ways to work on this? I mean, is taping your mouth shut at night one thing? Is just doing what I've been doing, which is just breathing through my nose and workouts, or what do you do?
Certainly. If you can tolerate it, I would get some mouth tape, and for a month, dedicate yourself to trying to sleep the night through with your mouth taped.
Micropore tape on Amazon is the easiest and cheapest. Although I had to buy a case of 12 last time I bought it, so I don't know if you can buy ones and twos.
Whatever you got to do, get it done. You could also use painter's tape. It comes off. Painter's tape's real easy. It'll come off.
Right.
That said, there's one. 2, spend the next 4 weeks just nasal breathing, no matter what it is you do. No matter what you do. Only when you talk and when you eat should you open your mouth. And if you're going to talk all day, try and take breaks and do some nose breathing between. Start a very simple breath practice. On Power Speed Endurance, we have a breath calculator that's free. You can do this CO2 tolerance test. It's explained. Then you can put your score in, and it'll give you 7 different breathing protocols to play with. You
mean the test you just talked about? The one where you're seeing your...
Got it.
Got it. Okay, got it.
Yep. So find one protocol that makes you feel kind of alert but calm. And then another protocol that makes you feel really calm and relaxed, like you could almost go to sleep. Do one in the morning to make you feel alert and calm for 10 cycles, and one in the evening, minimum of 2 hours before bed. So anywhere from 2 hours to right before bed, right? That you're going to do at night, that's going to make you feel calm, relaxed, and like you could go to bed. You will see a tremendous shift in those 4 things in your physiology in 1 month. I guarantee.
Which 4 things?
Do the 2 breathing protocols.
Oh. Yes.
Tape your mouth, right?
Yeah.
And then
I've been taping my mouth for like almost 2 years now, so I didn't stop after a month.
Yeah, you may not need to tape your mouth. You'd probably be pretty surprised. I wake up when my mouth opens now.
Interesting.
Is that odd? No.
That should be normal.
That is right. Why? I'm moving into a high stress response.
Right.
What happens with threat, which is the derivative of fear?
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I offload fast energy. So mouth breathing is the signal for fast energy. Nose breathing is for slow, calm energy, right?
So I'm doing 2 of the 4. Well, I'm actually only.
No, you're doing all 4. No. You're
not
training.
But I'm not doing the 2 protocols.
Yeah, I would start doing the 2 protocols. This is going to regulate your nervous system in the morning and in the evening. The biggest thing we get back from people, the fastest thing we get from people is how much their sleep changes immediately.
You know, it's interesting. It's funny we're talking about this. I've been using an Oura Ring for years, and I've always had trouble with deep sleep. I've never and I don't know if that because I'm getting deep sleep, but the Oura Ring doesn't really track it correctly. I don't really know. But when the COVID thing started, I noticed a sudden decrease in deep sleep. And I had been using I use a yantra mat, which is a acupressure mat that I get on.
I have one.
I lay on that for like 15 minutes at night. Sometimes I fall asleep on the damn thing and I'm on it for 2 hours.
Yep.
It's painful.
And it's really hard to get off.
Off.
I do it too, dude. I do it too.
You're one of the only people that even knows what the hell it is. I mean, nobody knows what they are. But so I noticed a sudden decrease, and I've not been able to figure out or find a way to get it back, like the deep sleep that I was getting, because the yantra mat was a game changer for me. And I'm curious as to maybe doing.
I would. So here's what's happening. So the reason the reason I'm saying there's 7 protocols, and you got to find one that makes you alert and calm. And you got to find one that makes you feel, calm and want to go to sleep. Here's what we figured out. Not everybody responds to the same protocols in the same way. That's been the problem with the breath space for so long. And this is also why I have not run around really doing big level group breathing sessions, which are easy money makers, easy things to do, is when I really was like, oh my God, like not everybody is getting the same reactions. This is actually kind of a little, it's just a little dicey to do with people to just go, hey, you should do box breathing. Well, guess what? I got somebody who's got high anxiety and is on medication, and any sort of breath holding freaks them out.
Well,
so
it's,
we're not gonna do breath
interesting you mentioned box breathing. When I do my meditations, I practice different breathing protocols, and I will like I did one the other day that's a 4 in, 7 hold, 8 out. And that one to me feels incredibly relaxing, incredibly good. Like it feels really, really good. Box breathing doesn't feel good at all. Like it feels too linear. I need to slow. Like I feel like I'm out of breath. It's weird. Obviously it's not weird. It's you're describing what I'm talking about,
brother. This is your brain setup on emotional response to respiration. This is where we really do. So I developed IP when I started work with Dr. Andrew Huberman at Stanford Medicine, because I got involved with the Sphere study, and he wanted somebody to develop protocols. And I asked what they were doing, and I had already been running around fingerprinting a bunch of high level folks in the entertainment world, et cetera, and all over, athletes, et cetera. Like I was setting them up on exactly what we're talking about right now, where I would get on with somebody. I'd run them through a couple protocols. I'd ask them what their life's like, how they react to things, what's going on. Then I'd get them set up on specific protocols that are going to help regulate their nervous system. So we took an emotional reactivity scale done by Harvard, and we ran through that. And I was able to take about 50 to 100 people I had already screened and set up on protocols, because I set up stuff. We organized that in fashion. And I was able to go back to these people and ask the same questions of this Harvard emotional reactivity score. And we developed IP on how to screen specific emotional reactions to specific protocols. The problem is right now is that's tied up in an old IP app that we're actually going to start to bring back out. But anybody can do this if they just go play with the specific protocols, because you can feel the difference like you did. Wow, 4-7-8 makes me feel really, really good. Yeah, you should stick with that. Your body is telling you something, right?
Yeah, is is 478 better than 468 or 469, or like, do
Well,
I play with it that
the,
much?
You should. Yeah,
Wow.
man. Yeah. I mean, this is what I have people who I mentor that like, this is a lot, like the mentorship that I run with people is largely based on human behavior and what people are doing. But I just use breathing to kind of show them the gateway in, and here's how this works. And all right, so we're getting this response. Let's tweak this a little bit. Let's see what this happens. Let's see how this happens. And they inevitably find things that work for them, and then they play around with it. Here's the interesting thing. You'll get to a point to where you can actually get these protocols to almost switch or be very similar to each other. Once you get to specific levels of dealing with your emotions, your behavior, and CO2, which we are deeming the stress molecule. So it is this metabolic stress messenger. This is the signal for stress. And the reason we say that is because not only metabolically do we use it, is it used to make oxygen available, but from a brain standpoint, it's the signal for the panic switch. And you don't even need an amygdala, which is your threat sensor, right? So the amygdala is responsible in our limbic system for threat detection, meaning it sees the threat before you do. So if we were out in nature and we saw a bear, it picked that up before we were like, that's a bear. We were like, blink, that's the amygdala. You don't need that. Like, it could be null and void, but you still have a panic switch for the use of oxygen. That makes sense because this is how we move energy. And that's the most important part of what we do. And so if we're not constantly moving energy efficiently, we're now going into this threat system, this high threat situation. So this is where we get it all jumbled up with the thinking and how our behavior and emotion. And so it's really diving into how I respond to things and how that happens. And so this is where it's really important to pay attention to strong emotions and be like, that's interesting. I'm having this visceral reaction right now to something, and I'm deterring off. And it's like, maybe my bandwidth, or I've been doing too much. And it's like, how do I get back to normal? Turns out you can regulate your nervous system through breathing. That's the switch that we have control over. Right?
Okay, so these protocols, I think people are going to want to know where to find them. They're on powerspeedendurance.com.
Yep. Go under learn, and then go to breathing resources. And then if you go into breathing resources and scroll down, you'll see breath calculator. Just tap it.
Okay.
If you go on, if you're on Instagram, it's linked in my bio.
Okay, great. And don't you have a paid for, like, how do people work with you? Or is there an app? Is there I'm not really sure how you're doing that now.
So we have a subscription, and that subscription carries a lot of the training ideas that we have, but now we have specific, like, we have breath work, daily breath work. People could come in and they could just do the breath calculator and just follow along with the daily breath work progressions that are happening, that it talks about. And they could just instantly go and do some things. Then there's also all of our educational information on the stuff that goes in the deeper layers of why. Like, we've got a whole series that's been rolling out. It's a deep dive on why nasal breathing and every aspect of it, the immune system, the immune responses. What are these responses? What sort of, things are occurring? Why are, what's mucus's role? Like, what does it do? I mean, just getting into all of the minutia, the parasympathetic nervous system and how it works with breathing. And, why is that a thing? Getting people to really understand what it is we've started to really peel the layers back on, so that they have a tool that they understand how to get them home to a place where they're actually comfortable and they can understand what's going on physiologically. Because what we don't understand, we worship or we fear. And that's Alice Walker, but it's like, that's a quote from her, but that is what we do. I do it, you do it, everybody does it, and understanding is the cure for anything. It's just, we really don't want a cure because that requires work. We seek relief.
We want a pill. Give me the pill.
Give me the pill. And that's our unfortunate problem.
Yeah.
And I'm not demonizing medicine. Medicine is there for a reason and a very important role. But if medicine's the first line of response for everything that's going on with us.
I just talked to, I had David Perlmutter, Dr. Perlmutter on the show a couple weeks ago. And my reference for that is from whitewater rafting and kayaking. You know, if you take a whitewater rafting trip, they'll tell you the first line of defense is you. You fall out of the raft. Yes. Do not wait for the guide. Do not wait for the rope to throw. Do not wait for you need to know how to swim. You need to know how to put your body in a position where you're not going to bash your head into a rock. And you need to know how to swim towards shore. And you are your first line of defense. Like when I talked with Dr. Perlmutter, it was like, you're your own best doctor. It starts with you.
Yes.
So be responsible for your shit, people.
Make it. Yeah, that's all I'm teaching is responsibility. I'm just doing it through, here's how your physiology works. Here is the base. Here's the foundation of it all. You got to breathe. And here's what's happening. Your breath is going to tell you exactly what's going on at any point of the day because of how it's wired up into the system.
That's amazing.
Right?
That's amazing.
Yeah. So we've got, if anybody who's watching this wants to jump on, we've got a free month on that subscription. So if you put in Whole Life PSE, they'll get a free month.
www.powerspeedendurance.com.
Yep.
Right.
Click on
and then
PSE Pro.
Use code
Whole Life PSE.
Whole Life PSE. When you go to subscribe, right? When you.
Yep. Just subscribe, and then as it checks you out, you just put in that coupon code, and that'll give you a free month.
Awesome. I'll put that also in the notes. This is going up on Facebook, YouTube, bunch of places, but I'll put that also in the show notes because it'll go up as a podcast in a few weeks.
Cool. Great.
Brian, thank you so much. It's funny because when I told you that I was trying to limit myself to 30 minutes on these calls, you laughed, I laughed. It's been 50 minutes and I'm not done. I mean, we're not done.
But if you got another question, I got a little time.
Well, no, yes, I've got so many questions. I mean, I literally could be on for another 2 hours. I say that a lot, but over the years of doing this, I know that people's attention spans don't necessarily, I'm not Joe Rogan yet. So I don't have the audience and I don't have the staying. I don't listen to Joe Rogan because I don't have 3 hours to sit down and listen to a podcast.
It's very rare I can get through it, but good, man, that dude changed the podcast game and good for him. He just made a Spotify deal that probably just,
yeah.
So
I mean,
awesome,
I listen to his podcast when there's a guest that I'm very acutely aware of wanting to know more about. So, they're really good. But anyway, dude, thank you. Just hang tight. I'm gonna end the broadcast.
Yeah.